how much did they actually tell you about your character before you joined?
Like any show, you get a little bit of a preview of what's to come, so you know what kind of energy to bring into your character from the start of the show. But I like that they didn't tell me everything, and I think they're still figuring out how they're going to write for you as they go. So originally, I thought this was only going to be a brief stint on the show. I didn't realize it would turn into um, what the character turned into throughout the rest of the season. So that was really exciting. So I knew there was a backstory, that there was some dark secret essentially that had yet to be revealed. So, but I didn't know where exactly that would go. But I think that's the gift of getting to act in TV, is that you get to see how the story's going to unfold, and you don't necessarily have all the answers right away, and you have to um, think on the spot.
Yeah. Well, and obviously we did learn a lot about his backstory in last week's episode. What conversations do you have with the writers about the kind of tension he has with his family and the secrets they've been keeping from each other and kind of how that's played out into who he is now?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, we had some fun conversations about that. There was an awesome writer and director team on that episode, specifically as I had quite a lot to do on that episode, and I felt a lot of pressure to bring an authenticity and as much truth and depth as I could to this character who we've only just sort of met, but it comes with a heavy burden essentially. And so, yeah, we had a lot of fun trying to split the difference of a character who's trying to cover a lot of what he's feeling, and just get on with the job and to prove himself, and to not be seen as incapable of performing his work because of emotional issues. And I think we've all been there on work days when we feel not our best, and triggered by feelings from our past or whatnot, and having to just carry on and be taken seriously, and do our jobs. So I think we could all relate to it. And yeah, I really enjoyed how we found a thin line to play on, of a character that isn't, anywhere lost in self-pity, but also not denying his emotional experience entirely either.
Well, and he also did opt to open up to Rizwan, which felt like a really big step. What does that mean for that relationship going forward, as there was that level of honesty that he didn't really share with anyone else?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think what's great playing characters who are so versed in human psychology is they're kind of almost steps ahead of maybe where us mere mortals would be, and that especially for their age, these young men especially are probably in their mid-20s or so as graduate students. So I think the emotional maturity of them being able to share such vulnerabilities, and to uh, give helpful loving advice so early into a male friendship, I think was quite rare to see in TV, and that was exciting to perform. And it builds trust, obviously. If you let down your walls, and you, especially for Simon's sake, tell a secret that he hasn't told to anybody, it builds a massive trust. And I think especially in a team like this, where they're dealing with such high tension scenarios, that you have to trust each other. And starting off quickly in a relationship by revealing things you might not share with even your closest family, I think is a great way to bond. And so I was really glad they gave us that opportunity to explore that.
Yeah. Well, for as solid as the team had started to feel, now things are getting shaken up again because Phoebe is joining the mix. How is Simon handling that addition to his team?
Well, I think having a pretty girl around the office isn't the worst thing. He's probably not horrified by it. But there's also an intimidation, and she's obviously a star at what she does. Hermione, if she grew up, we call her. So I think there's a excitement and a nervousness to impress her, and obviously not step on her toes. Um, but to find his place in that dynamic now, essentially, that there's three of them now, and it's different than two, in that there has kind of a tie break, and someone has to decide who's going to call the shots. And given their level of experience, they might be a little competitive when it comes to that. So I think fans will have a lot of fun seeing how that dynamic unfolds, and probably find it quite relatable.
Well, on that note, Rizwan is the number one right now. Phoebe was the number one back then. How is Simon handling his own loyalties in terms of, his number one, but also acknowledging Phoebe's kind of history in this group?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like I think a kid trying to play favorites with his parents and deciding who he's going to listen to, who's in charge right now, mom or dad, and they have to figure that out themselves as well. And I think what's interesting is that Alec allows us to discover this dynamic organically instead of prescribing how it needs to be done. So I think Simon is a bit caught in the crossfire as to how is this going to go, who's my boss. But I think trusts that Alec wouldn't put people in this position who aren't qualified and knows that everything with Alec is likely some sort of experiment. So we probably know that we're in the middle of a mini experiment of his as we as we figure out the hierarchy.
Yeah. Well, and we haven't gone really to see a lot of the Simon and Phoebe dynamic. Like, what is that like when you guys actually get to play that going forward?
Yeah, we have a nice moment I think in the this next episode coming up where there's some vulnerability expressed by Simon that he doesn't feel as secure and confident around Phoebe as he would like, as she is very smart and clearly demonstrates it with being able to think off the cuff in ways that he probably thought he could better, but realizing he's met his match. So there's an intimidation there, but he's someone that thankfully has some emotional maturity, probably more than most guys his age, to admit when he's feeling insecure. And so they're able to move past that and to find a co-working relationship that where there's respect.
Well, and the case, there are some pretty high stakes in the next episode with the potential train derailment. What can you tease about how the team is trying to save the day there?
Yeah, so it's gonna be an exciting one. It's involves a concept called forecasting. So essentially, there's um, people out there that I didn't know existed, but they do, and they essentially through a complex algorithm can decipher whether there could be a natural disaster or any type of catastrophe in society. And so some forecasters come to our department and warning of a potential catastrophe involving the train system. And so we are thrust into that situation with a ticking time bomb, essentially, to figure it out before there could be a mass casualty event. So we have to essentially put aside our awkwardness, our team's awkwardness of figuring out who's in charge and pull through to save lives. So I like that tension a lot to have obviously a very plot driven episode about coming disaster, but then the relationships also being in flux. So I think it combines to make some pretty intense drama.
One of the kind of lingering things over Simon is his mother and just kind of her being there in the kind of looming background. What can you tease about how she will be impacting his role in the group and just his life in general going forward?
Well, I think like anyone that has a overbearing and larger than life personality of a parent, we can probably relate to someone who's been in their shadow and needs to create his own mark on the world and not being weighed down too much by his name. But he also knows that thankfully in this last episode, we see they find a little bit of resolution together and it won't be as big of an obstacle for him going forward. So I think like anyone, we're influenced by our parents and it's impossible not to affect our psychology. But I think thankfully we've seen him find a little bit of closure so that he can focus on the cases at hand as the season progresses.